Well, good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you to the 5th edition of UNIDIR's Innovations Dialogue. Last year we took this event to New York, and this year we're delighted to be back in our institutional hometown in Geneva in this beautiful futuristic campus biotech. The Innovations Dialogue at UNIDIR is one of our big flagship events, and it's dedicated to exploring the impact of emerging and new technologies on international peace and security. And we're really trying to bring together stakeholders from all walks of life and disciplines, from governments, of course, from industry, from academia, and of course also civil society. The focus of the innovations dialogue is really on fact and evidence-based discussions, balanced discussions. We're trying to capture a broad range of different perspectives in a very diverse global community. And the aim of the innovations dialogue is to build shared understandings and to dispel myths about these new technologies and how scientific, technological developments impact the global security environment. Now, when we were discussing in New York last year, we were focusing on responsible AI in the international peace and security context, but that really was in the pre-ChatGPT era, I would say. And since then, I think our perceptions about artificial intelligence have changed quite dramatically. Suddenly, the topic has become real, and it has become real for a much wider audience, the global public, policymakers more generally. I think ChatGPT has allowed us and the global public a mesmerizing glimpse on how good AI has already become, how transformative on basically all aspects of society its impact is likely going to be, and also how sudden these groundbreaking technological developments will impact our lives. I think the Secretary General at the United Nations was quite right when earlier this year he said, technology is not moving incrementally and the time to act is now. Now, I think that's clearly the case, and it's also the case for applications of artificial intelligence in a military context. AI is already being used in a wide range of military applications. That use is only going to increase, and in many ways, it's quite likely it'll revolutionize the way wars are fought in the future and how militaries operate. So what not long ago was an issue really primarily for rather small expert communities is now gaining much bigger interest, and it's, I think, safe to say it's also gaining momentum in the multilateral governance space. We've seen a lot of activity in 2023 alone. So if you recall, we started the year first with a summit on responsible AI in the military domain, hosted by the Netherlands. That was in February. And that resulted in a call to action endorsed by more than 50 states. On the same occasion, the US government launched a political declaration on responsible military use of artificial intelligence and autonomy. And there were then 2 international conferences in Costa Rica and Luxembourg that focused on the more specific issue of lethal autonomous weapon systems and supported the work of the dedicated group of governmental experts here in Geneva. Now, this group of experts, the GGE itself, concluded its 2023 work with states agreeing on the so-called 2-tiered approach that prohibits the use of autonomous weapons whose effects in attack cannot be anticipated or controlled, and for other autonomous weapon systems establishes that specific measures should be developed and implemented to ensure compliance with international law. In addition, industry and the scientific community at large have become increasingly vocal about these issues, not necessarily with a military focus, but on the governance of AI and the urgency of it more generally. Earlier this year, the Future of Life Institute published an open letter that now counts more than 30,000 signatories, including some prominent voices and innovation leaders, asking to pause the training of powerful AI models while calling on policymakers to dramatically accelerate the development of robust AI governance systems. Also, last month, Microsoft published a proposed blueprint for legal and regulatory response to AI governance needs. Now, building on all of these activities, all this momentum, the 2023 edition of our Innovations Dialogue here at UNIDIR will provide a platform for military, technical, and legal experts to discuss more in depth the impact of artificial intelligence on all the various domains of warfare, and including, but not limited to, autonomous weapon systems. AI, of course, holds great promise from a military perspective for improving the speed, the accuracy of military decision-making in planning and in operations. It's a tool for process optimization and all-purpose technology, and it will play out in a wide range of fields, of course also in the military domain. Especially if it's combined with robotics, or latest generation sensor technology, there really is a wide range of potential applications, ranging from AI-enabled logistical support to early warning systems, intelligence gathering, surveillance, all the way to AI-supported command structures, AI-driven cyber operations, and then at the end of the spectrum, AI-supported combat operations and autonomous weapon systems. So far, the vast amount of existing work and discussions focuses on challenges that are common to artificial intelligence across the board. And what we're trying to do with our innovations dialogue this year is really to try and start taking the discussion to the next level, dig a little deeper, and focus on how AI plays out in the different domains of warfare. Of course, AI is discussed now all over the globe and increasingly also in the military context, but usually the focus is on rather general applications. We, as I said, want to dig deeper and ask questions: how will artificial intelligence impact on land, sea, aerial warfare? What will it mean for outer space, for cyberspace, or the cognitive domain in the future? What are specific military, technical, legal, maybe ethical challenges that apply to these different domains? And how can AI bring opportunities and benefits, as well as challenges and risks to these different domains? Today, many AI-supported military applications are still at a rather experimental stage, and it's difficult to know what will ultimately stick, especially when these things are taken out of the laboratories into a dynamic real-world battlefield context. But I think it's clear that in the current environment of heightened geopolitical tension, accelerating competition for first-mover advantages in the tech domain, and with an enabling technology as powerful as AI, there are some significant concerns and risks as well. And the list is rather long. There are risks of inadvertent escalation, risks of misperception when entirely new systems are fielded in a battlefield context, risks of accidents and malfunctioning, of course. There are concerns about unpredictability, lack of transparency and bias in AI-supported systems. But above all, AI raises profound legal and ethical questions about human agency and human control, especially when we're talking about life and death decisions. Now, it's clear these risks cannot be mitigated by individual actions alone, neither of states nor technology developers. Unilateral measures certainly play an important role, but collective action at all levels, political and technical, will be necessary to achieve meaningful and sustainable impact. So to this effect, today's Innovations Dialogue will provide hopefully an opportunity to discuss what these collective actions could and should look like going forward. Now with that, and before closing, let me just take this opportunity to express on behalf of UNIDIR our sincere gratitude to the sponsors of the Innovations Dialogue. The 2023 Innovations Dialogue is supported by the generous contributions of the Security and Technology Program's core donors, the government of the Czech Republic, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Microsoft. With that, I very much look forward to fruitful and stimulating discussions throughout the day. And without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Giacomo Percy Paoli. He is the head of UNIDIR's Security and Technology Program, and he's also the master of ceremony throughout the day. Giacomo, over to you.
Thank you, Robin, for the introduction, and also on my behalf, welcome to the 2023 edition of the Innovations Dialogue. Whether you're joining us here in the room in Geneva or online, it is truly a pleasure to have you with us today. I don't have very long remarks. Most of my speaking points were put in the script of the video you saw at the beginning of the event. So I'm just going to make a few logistical observations to help you make the most of the day with us. So first and foremost, the program, the conference program. You see it on the slide. You should have it if you're here in the room printed. The conference program is very rich. We're really going to take you onto a journey, really, across the lands, into the sea, up in the sky and the stars, and then into the digital world. These are going to be 4 thematic panels that will be preceded by a scene setter that will just follow my remarks. And all of this will hopefully pave the way towards the last panel of the day, where we're going to do our best to try answering the question, what's next? Where do we go from here? The program, as I said, is very rich. We managed to gather excellent speakers from all around the world, and I invite you to consult the program online on the event page, where you can read the full bios of our speakers. In the interest of time, during the panels, we'll only be introducing them with their name and title, but please do consult their bios on the website. But as it was mentioned also in the promotion leading up to this event, we really want this dialogue to be not only a dialogue among speakers, but also a dialogue with you, the audience. And to do that, we have set up a platform called Slido. You can, whether you're here in the room and you should have received a card with a QR code, or whether you're following us online, you can access this platform using the QR code, or just go on sli.do and insert the code #ID23. Through this platform, you will be able to ask questions to our speakers throughout the day. These questions will be then published, and you can vote. You can see what other questions have been asked. So help the moderators doing the job, and vote if you see questions that you think are particularly interesting for you. Please do express your support or add anything that you think should be added. This is really a great opportunity for us, and we're, again, very pleased that you were able to join us. I think I've covered all of the operational and logistical notes that I had to cover, and I think what is left to do now is just to invite on stage Dr. Cecilia Patel, the Deputy Director of UNIDIR, that will be moderating the scene-setting panel and introduce the speakers. So with that, I wish you a great continuation of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Good morning, everyone, whether you're in the room, or good morning or afternoon for those of you joining us virtually. And a warm welcome. Geneva is indeed very warm, and we are very much looking forward to intense and fruitful discussions today. I am absolutely delighted to have two esteemed speakers for this panel. Here joining me in the room is Professor Brian Lee. Professor Lee is the Dean of the College of Multidisciplinary Studies at Seo-Kyong University in the Republic of Korea. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Lee. And online, I hope that we will soon be able to see online Professor Sabine Sustruck. Good morning. Professor Sustruck is joining us from Lausanne. She is Director of the Images and Visual Representation Laboratory at the EPFL, the Lausanne École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. Thank you very much, and good morning to you, Professor Sustruck. So we have a very ambitious day ahead of us, as we will try to unpack how AI impacts already and works across different domains. As to whether we have matching efforts in terms of efforts to push and governance of AI, so that that governance also keep up to speed. Governing the technology is, of course, possible, but it means identifying that will make a regulation effective, and also have a regulation that comply with international law. So, because we believe that where stands today, but also where and involved in those. So, Professor Sustruck, I'll start with you, please. Clearly, and as the director, Dr. Geis, was mentioning, 2023 seems to be the year of AI, where many applications are being discussed, services and technology emerging. But is this really about?
Yes, thank you very much. I have troubles hearing you. You're going in and out, so I did not get the last of your question, but I think I get the gist of your question. So, no, 2023 is actually not a new year of AI. AI has basically been progressing all along. What is new, though, is that we have now applications of AI that have, if I will say, human-like characters. So this AI, or the whole discussion in the wider public, came up because of this program called ChatGPT that basically seems to answer like a human, which of course it does not, right? I mean, and here I do make a plug of saying artificial intelligence in the sense of intelligence, the way we understand it, does not exist. It is all still machine learning. That means programs that learn based on data and then do something. And that can be as easy as answering a question like ChatGPT, or flying a drone in a military setting. So the thing that has changed is that this ChatGPT will give answers that are human-like. Sometimes they're even correct. And like this, this kind of interface with the general public has been democratized, if I will say so. It's much easier now for everyone to use a artificial intelligent software compared to before, where you needed to have at least some knowledge. And let's not forget, this ChatGPT now can not just answer question, but it can also code for you. So now this is a program that has multiple purposes, versus before we were just used to having a single purpose. It's still extremely limited, right? It can answer questions to you, but it can code, it can actually write a poem for you, but it can still not drive your car. So it's not yet a multi-purpose general intelligence system, but it is one that can actually do multiple purposes. But let's not forget, it's a machine learning system. It has been trained on data, and it's only as good as the training data it was given.
Thank you, Professor Sustrunk. Let me turn to you, Professor Lee. Let me turn to you, Professor Lee. As we consider integrating AI in military capabilities in a responsible way, this is a term that we will be using repeatedly today. We know this is not easy, and we know that it is likely to require different sectors working together in close cooperation, especially the government, end users, namely military users, and industry and academia as well. Based on your own experience, notably in the Republic of Korea, working across sectors, how do you think we can best manage these relationships?
Okay, just in time. Okay, I actually have prepared my answer for that question, but the continuation from Professor Sabine's answer, I'd like to add a few things there. Yes, AI so far, well, we know what it's capable of, that machine learning, the trained, all the data that we give them. The question is about not if they can learn what they teach them. It is more about, can it learn something that we are not teaching them? That is a very difficult question to answer. And there's a glimpse of ideas here and there that it may be capable of doing so. If that is the case, we need to find the answer to the question, can we teach it to behave ethically and responsibly? If that is possible, then some of the problems that we may anticipate at this point would go away. But if you want to do that, we have to create a core value principle from all the sectors, government, military, industry, academia. We all need to be on the same page, and we need to create something that we all can agree on as a core value that we pursue as human beings. If we can teach some of those things, if we cannot teach, if we can somehow regulate it or govern it or control it, and that's the direction that we may have to go. The thing is, no one sector, no one institution can do all that, and we cannot put together the core value principle by one person or one organization. I believe that's why we are here today, to discuss where we should go, find the direction and find the goal. And I have been in a position to facilitate or mediate the process between the government and the industry and the academia. And that wasn't easy. But if we can get together on the same page, and if we can keep discussing toward the same goal, and things get actually better, and we can actually look for what we call proactive facilitation. The more we talk, the sooner or more efficiently and effectively we can find the insight, and we can somehow set the core value principle, then we can create a guideline that we can use on AI. It is not about if we can regulate AI. I mean, so far people have been thinking that the AI only has a limited capability, and that we just need to find a way to use it responsibly. But now we have to actually think about, we may have to code it in a way that it learns ethically and responsibly. So the only way to do that is using this platform and pursue multilateral discussion about where we should go. If we can somehow set the goal, then we can find a way to get there. I believe that's what we are going to do today, and we all know what type of impact AI has on our lives. But can we actually answer, do we know where we want it to go, or where we want to go together? So the only answer that I have to your question at this point is keep talking and keep finding the common ground and the core value principle.
Thank you very much indeed. And as you left us with some of the questions, including where do we want to go, I'll turn back to you, Professor Søstrøm, to say, where do you want it to go? And maybe speaking from the scientific community, what levers do you think the scientific community can use to influence the future development of AI technology?
Well, that's a very good question, and I have a relatively depressing answer. That in general, at this point in time, because it is the machine learning, the data or the amount of data and the amount of training necessary to actually make a sophisticated kind of model is beyond most universities. So, I mean, we do not own the data. The data is basically locked away. We see that. We do not know on which data most of these models are trained on. This is not public and not open access. And the computational power that is needed to actually train many of these applications is just beyond an academic facility. It's not beyond a government, but it's beyond the academic facilities most of the time. So what then science can do is they can, of course, start pointing the finger of all the shortcomings, right? I mean, we actually know the shortcomings quite well. We can start pointing the fingers, as just as was mentioned, on the ethical implications. We can also start pointing the fingers that maybe industry is not the best to regulate industry themselves. That has usually not worked so well in our history, so that we can basically an honest knowledge broker. That's what academia can do. But it is a fallacy to think that academia can actually control the development of artificial intelligence. It has gone beyond academia.
Thank you, Professor Søstrøm. So clearly highlighting some of the limits of what can be done by the academic sector, but you pointed out to the role of the industry, which you qualified as being limited, the industry self-regulation. Professor Lee, what do you think of that? The industry self-regulation, learning from the experience in a number of other contexts regarding self-regulation by industry. How do you see the potential role of industry-led initiatives in this area?
Industry is going to have to do a lot of things, but the self-imposing regulation might not be one of them. The reason I just said this is, yes, we need to find a way to regulate it or control it, whatever way you want to prefer to call it. But the industry is not going to go out and set the regulation for themselves. And that has to be done by the consensus and, in a way, agenda-neutral governance structure. That's how I see it. But the industry has its responsibility, and the academia has definitely its responsibility as well. But the government and the military, they have their own agenda. They have what they want. But in a way, we all want the sustainable development, not destructive innovation by itself. Therefore, industry is going to have to do a lot of things to develop it and refine it and to make it actually work and to make it viable to sustainable. But at the same time, that regulation has to be done by the consensus of all the stakeholders together in the governance structure. That's what I hope.
Thank you. So you both seem to be agreeing on the importance of multi-stakeholders, dialogue and initiatives, but then also both of you insisting on the responsibilities and the central role of government in the governance. Professor Sustrunk, maybe just following up from that. So where do you think that nevertheless in this multi-stakeholders dialogue, the scientific communities could be possibly more involved than they have been so far?
The scientific community and regulations usually do not go that well together either, right? So basically that's not a role. Usually regulations are roles of governments and political systems, and that's not where we actually are naturally at home. With this one, because, and here I think maybe one thing that we really need to be aware of, it is actually progressing quite quickly. So we cannot wait with regulation for another 30 years. You know, I'm coming from a country, Switzerland, that does not regulate very often. But in this case, we cannot wait the other 30 years or 40 years before we even start thinking about it. Having said that, it is, of course, also not reasonable that each country regulates differently. So there needs to be organization, and here I think that especially an organization like yours can play an incredibly important roles, because they can pool governments together and actually help, maybe, you know, facilitate this discourse between politics and science. What science can also do, of course, is now developing even new models, right? And let's not forget about this. We mentioned before that, you know, artificial intelligence might start to show some signs of intelligence. A big might, by the way. There is, you know, as many pointers there is to this one, as many people say this is not possible yet, this kind of thing. But these kind of things can be looked at, right? And then science can actually, for the explainability of these models, science can do a lot. Because that's not necessarily in the interest of industry to actually work on the explainability of it. They usually work on the output of the models.
And as you pointed out to the fact that certainly the scientific research is going on, if not globally, at least in many different parts of the world at the same time, maybe a question related to that, which is, what is your view on the risk of proliferation of AI? And is that an adequate term to use, proliferation, when we apply it to AI?
Yes, it is. It is the right term to use. I'm not worried about the proliferation per se. I'm worried about the misuse of it. So let's not forget, at this point in time, it's humans using this AI for something. And for every application is for the good, one can actually misuse this application. And this is what I said before, you know, let's use maybe an example that's not per se in the military. ChatGPT has gotten very good at writing emails. Well, that makes it also very simple to write a spam email. That also makes it very simple to personalize emails, send it to everybody, and incite them to click on a link that might have a virus in it. So there's a lot of democratization in this kind of, like, in these applications, which can be used for the good, but it can also be misused. But let's not forget that there's still humans behind it that actually use or misuse this technology. But with this proliferation, unfortunately, it's not just the ethical usage that it will increase, it's also the misusage and non-ethical usage that will increase.
Thank you. Turning back to you, Professor Lee, I mean, speaking of misuse, of course, if there is one area, one domain in which there's a lot of fears of the risks of misuse, it is the military domain indeed. Yet at the same time, you also both recognize on the potential, and of course the huge potential that comes with AI, and the fact that we certainly cannot afford to, as humanity, we cannot afford to stop those important scientific developments. So looking at that balancing exercise, what do you think, where can we actually start in terms of limiting the misuse while keeping the potential?
Well, actually, I have to go with Professor Sabine on this one, that academia is not exactly good for this regulation and setting the tone for that. And I agree with her in a lot of ways that one, we cannot wait. And two, yeah, there's a human factor. So far, it's not AI that's causing the trouble. It's pretty much human at this point. But at the same time, can we actually answer to the question that do we know how we are going to use AI? It's a very irresponsible behavior if you just develop it and give it to anybody. They can use it for however cause they seem to fit. Therefore, as I said about 10, 20 minutes ago, the reason for us to be here today is to discuss and find the core value principle. And somehow we need to find a way to regulate it and control it. And as Professor Sabine said, it has to be done internationally in the coherent way, not just not country by country in a different regulation. So we cannot wait, and we need to start. We need to initiate something. But how do we balance the potential and the risks at this point? That can be answered after we figure out what exactly we wanted to do, how we want to use it. And at this point, a lot of people say different things about how we are going to utilize AI. And unless we reach at least a semi-consensus of how we want to use it, it'll be very difficult to answer those questions. And hopefully, at the end of today's all the discussions, and that we can somehow find a clue to reach that conclusion or consensus.
Thank you very much. I am tempted to really ask you the same last question to both of you, which is that if you had, a wish as to how can we really push the agenda forward, and you could have really one wish, what would be that wish? How would you formulate it? Maybe starting with you, Professor Sustrong.
Openness, open science, open data, transparency in AI. I don't think we can stop AI. It's because human curiosity, everybody will think, oh, I can see this, so why, can I do this and can I do this? So I think the research and development will just go, go on. But one thing we could ask for is openness. We could ask, okay, publish the code to your program, publish the data that you've used to train this, be totally transparent. So all these AI applications are totally transparent. That would give a knowledge base to everybody in the world, and also the possibility to actually develop something else. But it would, but the idea would be everybody has to publish everything and it's been totally transparent. That would actually mean that nobody has an unfair advantage.
Thank you, Professor Sustrunk. And as you speak of this, I'm reminded of the development of internet initially and the push by the academic community for openness. And then it's extremely interesting to look at the historical trajectory since then and what this has led to. Thank you. Your own wish, Professor Lee?
In addition to openness, I'd like to add empathy. The reason I said that is all the stakeholders, if they can try to understand what the other party is saying, what they are saying, then we can actually get to our consensus that much more quickly. So empathy, in my point of view, would be a very critical point. So I'd like to add empathy.
Thank you very much. So openness and empathy, what a beautiful way of starting these discussions. Many, many thanks indeed, Professor Sustrung joining us from Lausanne and Professor Lee for coming all the way from Korea to join us here today. Thank you for the very thoughtful contributions, in addition to helping us better understand the complexity of this journey that we have to take as we think of the future of multilateral governance regarding the use of AI in the military domain. Clearly, this sense setting has helped us to really also unpack some of the complexity. It was interesting to see that both of you insisted on the risks of misuse, the importance of international regulations, the urgency of that regulation. And I think that this is really something we also have to bear in mind. We cannot only be fascinated by the speed of development of AI, but also have to question whether we're keeping up in terms of the regulations, and especially the regulation as it comes to those applications that we can consider as highly risky or even unacceptable. And then really, obviously, both of you insisted on something that we at UNIDIR see as crucial and central, which is the balancing the potential with also a clear determination of where are the risks and finding the right balance between these two dimensions. With this, let us move to our first panel, which will be on AI and the land military domain. And I am absolutely delighted to call on stage my esteemed colleague, Dong-Yeon Chu, who is a senior researcher at UNIDIR, but who is also a retired major of the Republic of Korea Army, and with over 17 years of experience working in military strategy, defense policy, and was also, in fact, at Sejong University, where she established and led the Center for Future Defense Technology and Entrepreneurship before joining UNIDIR. So please join us on stage. Thank you very much again. Professor Sustrung, goodbye.
Thank you very much, Cecile. And it was really helpful to hear the scene-setting conversation before the substantive panel discussion. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dong-Yeon Cho. I am a senior researcher in the Security and Technology program here at the UNIDIR. And thank you all for joining us for the first panel focused on artificial intelligence and land warfare. We will discuss today a range of topics with leaders at the forefront, whom I will introduce in a minute, on some of the most consequential technology and international security challenges of our era. As we already heard today in this morning, AI is a reality in our day-to-day lives, and developments seek to make it a reality in the military context too. Anyone who reads national security, defense, and international intelligence strategies issued around the globe over the past few years is well aware of the pronounced role that emerging technologies and AI play across all of these documents. AI is at the heart of these policies and strategies, central to the concepts of various military concepts. AI technologies such as machine learning, natural language processing, neural networks, and deep learning provide the military and intelligence agencies with new operational solutions for predicting and countering threats, as well as for conducting military operations on the battlefield. Given the increasing priority of information dominance and information advantage across the entire continuum of competition, crisis, and conflict, AI is central to current and future intelligence efforts across all warfighting domains, especially the land domain. Besides automating the production of knowledge about threats, AI can also automate decision-making, which could dilute the role of human agency as an element of international conflict. Concerns at the core of the international debate about lethal autonomous weapons system or laws would also enter this discussion. So the first panel focuses on artificial intelligence and the land domain, and you may wonder why the domain matters. There are largely, I'll briefly explain about 3 elements we can think of. First, the land domain itself is composed of macro-scale, micro, nano, and other multi-scale materials, presenting constantly moving and changing characteristics of force, light, sound, heat, electricity, and magnets. Second, on the ground, each soldier solution can decide life and death, and it often conflicts with the opponent's will to fight. So multi-scale, high human dynamics and uncertainty will feature the actual application environment of AI. And lastly, recent rapid urbanization and new technology are forcing battles to move to urban areas to a larger extent than ever before, where AI systems are often required to work in extreme environments, such as nuclear radiation and chemical leaks, electromagnetic interference around high voltage power grids, weather hazards, light disturbances, and complex terrain with multiple obstacles, to name but a few. So these environmental factors certainly pose specific difficulties and challenges to the work of AI on the battlefield. So as you can see, on one hand, we have to deal with the issues surrounding the integration and application of AI itself on the ground. On the other hand, we also need to consider its governance and policies set up by different actors involved in developing and applying this technology. So to that end, we have with us today a fantastic panel of experts to discuss both the technology and its impact on the land warfare. I will start by introducing them very briefly. First, we are joined by Ms. Georgia Hines, a legal advisor with the International Committee of the Red Cross. She has extensive expertise in legal and humanitarian implications of autonomous weapons, AI, and other new technologies of warfare. Thank you very much for joining us. And next, we have Mr. Koichiro Takaki, Colonel in the Japan Ground Self-Defense and a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He has solid expertise in future warfare, military use of AI, cognitive warfare, and the relationship between emerging technologies and operational concepts. Thank you very much, sir. And next, we have Mr. Michael Dabb, a research associate at the Center for a New American Security, with expertise in AI safety and stability. Welcome. And last but not certainly not least, we have Dr. Wang-Guk Kang, the director of the Unmanned Vehicle Advanced Research Center at the Korea Aerospace Research Institute. Thank you very much for coming. So without any further ado, I would like to turn first to Colonel Takaki and Dr. Kang with the first question. From your perspective, what are the applications of AI in the ground domain? So in other words, what issue is AI aiming to solve within the ground domain, and how is AI intended to apply for these issues to be solved? So over to you.
So first of all, I'd like to ask what historians of 22nd century will write about the changes in warfare in the 21st century. I think the most revolutionary changes could be brought about by AI. AI enhances or replaces human brain. Weapons developed in previous human history have enhanced human muscles, eyes, and ears. Compared to primitive humans, modern humans have acquired powerful killing power and are able to see their enemies thousands of miles away and communicate with their allies thousands of miles away. But for the first time in the long history of human warfare, the brain is being enhanced. The changes brought about by AI will therefore be unprecedented and distinctive in human history. The fog of war, one of the essences of war, according to Clausewitz, originated from the inherent human characteristic of fear and fatigue on the battlefield. Will the accurate computational results of AI change even such a nature of warfare? Or will the difficulties of verification inherent in AI become a new fog of war? We may be now facing a question concerning the nature of warfare. Here, we need to consider what AI will be used for in future warfare. I think 4 types of military use of AI need to be considered. That is information processing, unmanned weapons, decision making, and information warfare. The first is the use of AI for information processing. AI will be able to process larger volumes of information at higher speeds. For example, images taken by satellites. What are the applications of AI-based information processing for land domains? In recent warfare, the battlefield is said to have become transparent. The massive and fast processing of images taken by satellites has enabled forces to get detailed picture of enemy forces. In the land domain, soldiers, weapons, and positions are usually disguised. AI image processing could be used to spot them. The second is the use of AI for autonomous unmanned weapons. As AI develops, control system will develop and unmanned weapons will become increasingly autonomous. Small drones have been used in large numbers in recent warfare. The area at altitudes of 10 meters or to several hundred meters, where small drones fly, has not been utilized by Air Force. Who will fly small drones over these low altitude areas? It is Army, which will use small drones for reconnaissance, attacks, and observation of artillery fire. The third is the use of AI for military decision making. With the development of AI in the future, AI may be able to do the decision making of military operations. What are the applications of AI-based decision making in the land domain? The planning, decision making, and execution of operations in the land domain have been much more complex and time-consuming than in other domains. Land combat was the most complex domain where each soldier has to make his or her own decisions, and thousands or tens of thousands of soldiers, weapons, and sensors should be synchronized. This requires a great deal of time for planning and coordination and has to overcome a lot of fog. In the future land domain, large language models will assist in the planning of military operations, while AI will optimize targeting and logistics. Thus, the planning and decision-making will be much faster. The fourth is the use of AI for manipulating human cognition. AI can produce highly accurate and large amount of disinformation at high speed. The judgment and cognition of the human receiving this information can be manipulated. In the land domain, each soldier is required to make his or her own decisions. Therefore, this information produced by AI can be used to mislead the cognition of each soldier. Thus, AI will lead to improved information processing, the development of unmanned weapons, faster decision-making, and the manipulation of human cognition. In the land domain, I think this would apply to the identification of disguised soldiers, weapons, and positions, the use of unmanned weapons in reconnaissance, attack, and observation at low altitudes, decision-making in complex land domains, and the manipulation of soldiers' cognitions. That is, thank you.
In recently in military conflict, what we observed is that there are a lot of drones used in battlefield. But what most impressed me is the way they use the drone in the battlefield. What I focus is that they use the drone for the conventional artillery fire controls. So they, with the drone data, they calculate the accurate position of the targets and the conventional artillery before the drone's appearance. There is no way to have accurate targeting. But with the drone, we can they can do that with the drone data. So one retired Russian general told the media that the drone turned the conventional artillery into precision guided weapons. So I think that is the most important and quite what we should look more closely. But with a closer look, what we can find is that it's not drone alone. There is maybe 3 or 4 different nodes, what it calls nodal actors. One is the drones, they gathering data. And in the field, the soldiers, they bring the Android tablet with them or some kind of handheld notebooks. They calculate with the drone data, they can calculate the firing kind of control data using their Android tablet. And another is the GIS software platform. And with these 3 actors, they create a kind of a battlefield data network. And with this data network, they use it to connect this network. They use a satellite communication technology. But with this one, they gather data in real time and so analyze the data and make old-fashioned or conventional artillery more sophisticated and technology-wise advanced ones. That is, I think, what we focus on in this stage. So that with this kind of data, we can call it a kind of data-centric warfare. I think with the drone or unmanned vehicle, the real, and in real sense, I think the data-driven or data-centric warfare started. But however, I should tell that current system has apparent limitations because each node, what I call it, I can call it a node. There is a drone and the Android tablet and even the GIS software. It is heavily depend on the manual operation. It is not fully autonomous. The drones are teleoperated or they navigated by the waypoint navigation. It's not AI technology. It's just the human operator so make a data and upload it to the drone and they flow to that data. So it's not an AI. So with this kind of a manually operated network system, the human soldiers who operated this system should have an additional burden in the battlefield. So now the question, why we need AI technology in the battlefield this time? Because with this kind of manually operated systems, it is the human soldier who operate the system is quite vulnerable, very weak to the enemies firing or to the enemies. So to protect the human soldiers, we need AI technology. So we need the autonomously flying drones or autonomously calculating or data processing in the Android tablets. So Android tablet, this system should, in this system we use Android tablet carried by the soldiers, but that should be turned into the unmanned ground vehicle or autonomous terrain ground vehicles, which can calculate it on board the data or the data what the battlefield want. So with the current data network, we can share the data, the process data to all the entities who engage in the battlefield. That's why we need kind of AI in this stage.
I thank you very much. I think it's a really good starting point for the later discussion because Colonel Takaki laid out the 4 types of military use of AI on the battlefield, which are information processing, unmanned weapons, and decision-making and information warfare. And then based on that, Dr. Kang really gave us a detailed description why we really AI these, and it's a debunk some of the myth. The AI is really save some of the human resources, but the reality is can be the opposite. So that's exactly why we develop AI to use and to save the human resources on the battlefield. But based on that, a really good starting point. I would like to continue ask some questions to Michael and Georgia on the overall. What would you say are the main advantages, but also the main challenges, which are specific to the integration and implications of AI within the ground domain? Maybe Michael.
Sure, yeah. So I'll start with challenges because it's more fun. So I think the biggest challenges for ground warfare and AI integration would be the complexity. You kind of talked about this in your opening remarks, that when it comes to air warfare or sea warfare, naval warfare, you're kind of looking for like one big ship or one plane in an expanse that's just kind of uniform. And that's definitely not the case in ground combat. You know, people are much smaller than ships are. They can change themselves, they can act differently, they can do different stuff in order to evade detection. My boss, Paul Shaw's new book, For Battlegrounds, has a really fun anecdote about this, where they had a camera that was designed to identify Marines moving across a field. And after a couple of days of like being trained on how to identify Marines, they asked the Marines to try to beat the system, and none of the Marines failed because they were all able to find different ways to beat it. One pretended to be a tree, one hid in a box, one kind of like somersaulted around. So, you know, it's a lot easier for humans to do things to fool these systems than it is for ships or planes. And then secondly, I kind of hinted at it a little bit, that like air and sea are fairly uniform in their terrain, and ground is not. I live in a forest, and about 1 kilometer away from my house, there's a swamp. And on the other side of that swamp is a farm and some grassland. So that's 3 entirely different terrain types that require different operational patterns, different vehicles, you know, all kinds of different things to allow you to operate in those. And those are all within walking distance. So developing AI systems that can handle the multitude of tasks that it's faced in ground warfare is going to be a lot more difficult than it will be for some other domains. As for advantages, it's ground warfare benefits because it's kind of the main theater. So advantages that get added to other theaters do impact ground warfare. So it's able to take advantage of some of the other integrations that will be mentioned in later panels. You know, if you can have AI co-pilots that help pilots, you know, achieve air superiority, well, that's great for close air support. So the ground warfare benefits from that directly. If you have ships shoot down missiles and to protect themselves, well, they can also protect units on the ground as well. So any advantage and value add you get in other domains can be stacked and included in ground warfare as well.
Thanks, Dongwan, and yeah, thank you for the great interventions. And I think we've kind of canvassed a lot of the issues already. But I suppose from the outset, I mean, the ICRC, the organization that I work for, we come at it primarily from an international humanitarian law perspective, law of armed conflict. And, of course, IHL doesn't explicitly prohibit AI. And the ICRC certainly is not opposed to new technologies of warfare and AI per se. And certainly you asked about potential advantages. So if we take one of the applications that Colonel Takagi highlighted, which is the incorporation of artificial intelligence into decision support systems, so DSS, certainly we can see an argument for a situation where an AI-supported DSS could facilitate widespread information collection and analysis, and in that way support IHL compliance. I mean, it actually requires planners and decision makers to do everything feasible to verify their targets. And that includes assessing all relevant and available sources of information. So if you do have an AI-enabled DSS that is providing greater situational awareness, potentially it could assist in reducing or minimizing civilian harm, which is an ongoing IHL obligation as well. So, from that perspective, we see that as a possibility. But at the same time, I am glad you asked about challenges, because I think we do need to be very alive to the challenges, the potential risks. And I think, if we're looking at an AI-supported DSS, this can arise purely by virtue of the system's limitations. We've spoken, Michael has highlighted the complexity of land warfare. And I think it's fair to say that no AI DSS can ever take into account the full spectrum of that operational reality. Even if you have a very high-performing machine learning system, they are prone to fail when they encounter inputs that differ from the data that they were trained on, that they were conditioned on in testing. So I think that is a very real inherent uncertainty in these systems, which when you pair it in, say, an urban environment where uncertainty about the location of a target by just a few meters will have very real consequences for civilians and for civilian objects. So I think that is a real challenge when it comes to ground warfare. Just to also then highlight, even if you have, a perfect system, which I would say is a big if, you can still have these problems around human-machine interaction. So, there are phenomena such as automation bias, where you have the human then over-relying on a machine output. And this can pose problems purely from an IHL compliance perspective, because IHL tests are not, or requirements are not only concerned with the result of an attack. So say, for instance, the IHL requirement of proportionality. It actually requires commanders, decision makers to engage in a forward-looking judgment process as to what is the anticipated military advantage against the expected incidental civilian harm. So you can use outputs such as a collateral damage assessment, but that is going to feed into that exercise of human judgment that is crucial for IHL compliance. So that, on the AI in DSS piece, are some of the key risks that we see. Just very briefly to highlight potentially on autonomous weapon systems, because I know this is another area that you touched upon that could be AI enabled. So autonomous weapon systems, when we talk about them, are weapon systems that select and apply force to targets without human intervention. We already have many of these deployed, but largely in sort of deterministic, simply rules-based systems. Now, start talking about incorporating AI into these, the concern is around introducing a level of unpredictability. There is a very well-recognized black box phenomena that occurs with many AI algorithms, where you might be able to say 9 times out of 10 it does X, but you can't say why it does X. And so whether this is a sufficient level of predictability, and whether you can adequately control and limit the effects of that system, which is a requirement under IHL. It also poses some challenges when we talk about things like the requirement that states review their weapons, which under Additional Protocol 1, Article 36, states have to review all their new weapons to make sure they can comply with IHL, or with international law more broadly, actually. Do that if you can't predict or you can't explain why it is functioning the way it is, and so you can't predict the functioning of that system, I think is an open question. And then I won't go into it, but there are some very real accountability challenges as well. If there is an unpredictable system that behaves in a way that is not intended, then you start to run into some problems with bringing home the accountability for anything that does go wrong. So I'll leave it there.
So thank you very much. I think During this discussion, we just brought up really important elements, which we would like to dive into later part of this discussion. Michael addresses some of the complexity the land domain entails. I think it's quite interesting to see the following discussions on the sea. It could be really complementary. These complementary kind of discussion. Of course. I hope but we can just get to that. But I really wanted to more dive into the battlefield characteristics. So my question goes to the Colonel Takaki again. How do you see AI changing land warfare and ground operations? And what impact it will therefore have? More specifically, what elements and are currently merely assumptions? Over to you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the changes brought about by AI need to be divided into 4 categories. These are improved information processing, the development of unmanned weapons, faster decision making, and the manipulation of human cognition. Let us consider AI-based information processing. In future land combat, even if soldiers, weapons, and positions are disguised in traditional way, AI image processing will be able to spot them. In the future land domain, no one will be able to hide. We must fight on a transparent battlefield. Will surprise attacks be possible in transparent battlefields? Information processing will make physical surprise more difficult, and the concept of surprise itself may change. Surprises may be carried out only in non-physical domains such as cyber and electromagnetic field. Conversely, we may be able to surprise attack against AI. AI depends on training data. If the training data is contaminated, the performance of AI will deteriorate. Therefore, sending contaminated data to can mislead the AI. Thus, the concept of surprise will change. Let's think about the use of unmanned weapons. Army will use small drones. Including low altitude areas. And the land domain will become three-dimensional. Ground forces have been heavily influenced by the terrain. A three-dimensional land domain will be less affected by terrain. This fundamentally changes the very concept of land. Third, let's have a look at AI information processing in the land domain. In the future, AI will assist the planning of military operations and optimize targeting and logistics. Thus, the planning and decision-making will be much faster. However, AI does not always make the right decisions, and it is difficult to verify the plans and decisions of AI produced by AI. Also, in the extreme conditions of warfare and in situations where if we rely, there is a danger that AI will instantly make critical decisions, such as starting a war. Relying on AI for military decision-making would create new dangers. Fourth, the manipulation of human cognition by AI. In the land domain, each soldier is required to make his or her own decision. Therefore, future land combat will be fought in a fragile environment where perceptions of soldiers can be manipulated and influenced by AI. Thus, in the land domain, AI. Thus, in the land domain, AI compared to the maritime domain. Tens of there are complex interactions, sometimes resulting in butterfly effect. Also, unlike the maritime and air domains, the land domain is not asset-based, but human-centered, and is an area where humans fight directly. For this reason, there is an inherent unpredictability arising from the fear and fatigue of each soldier, and there is a strong fog of war. The relationship between AI and the fog of war is not simple. If AI assists the planning and optimizes targeting and logistics, it may speed up decision-making in complex land operations. AI will also free from fear and fatigue, and many may overcome the unpredictability that stems from human nature. Faster decision-making and reduced unpredictability may be advantaged in AI in the land domain. However, the unpredictability of AI itself will be the reasons for which AI draws its conclusions are difficult to verify.
Thank you very much. I think it's really detailed explanation. Gave us a detailed explanation. And the three-dimensional of the land domain, the danger of the reliance on AI-based decision, and the vulnerability of soldiers' cognition. And I think you emphasized the human factor in the end, and that it's really aligned with the setting scene conversation we already had in the morning. And then based on that, I would like to just ask more about the human decision-making to the Michael and Dr. Kang. So anticipated impacts already Colonel Tanaka explained well for the impacts to the observe, orient, decide, act loop, otherwise known as the URA loop, are some of the most discussed among experts. Can you expand a little bit more on what changes you see emerging from the integration of AI within the URA loop, within the ground domain? So maybe Michael first.
Sure. Thank you for letting me go first. I think originally the thought, or I think the better word would be fear, was that with in the battlefield, but it turns out that with robotics, it's close. On the other hand, as we've been talking about, the effect on the second O and the D, or orient and decide, that is something that is occurring, is like happening rapidly. And I think there's a reason that in the United States' most well-known attempt to integrate AI is Project Maven, which is this like network of computers that can take in information and kind of spit out targets to help you plan out operations. So I think that's mostly where you're going to see a lot of upcoming innovation in AI integration, particularly, as states kind of think through how to put these technologies to use. They're going to focus on that O and that D, on trying to roll back the fog of war as much as possible. I tend to be a little skeptical about how far they can roll it back, but I think the goal is, instead of trying to use AI to mass kinetic force, it's to use AI to enhance the force that you actually have already existing.
Yeah, as a developer, I think is the OODA loop can give you some quite helpful, because with the OODA, we can define each function of AI clearly. So recently we developed the software package in modular way. So we can divide all the AI function into develop 4 different modules separately. And so all step cannot be AI software. I mean, the machine learning or data driven. For example, for the control, like the active part or control part, it is for the well-defined area. So we can use a conventional deterministic algorithm to control the drones. We don't need any AI algorithms for that. Of course, it's my opinion, so others can have different approaches. And data approach. But recent technology, I mean, the observation part. So that what I mean is that we can each different. So we don't need to mix it up, so make it complicated. So with the modular approach, we can make it more simpler. So for this, and the decision making, let's say that we can approach the decision maker module by the AI algorithm, or I mean the data-driven, or more heuristic equation, or the deterministic approaches, like a fault tree analysis. So for the decision-making part, I think personally, I think it's better to use a more deterministic way, because for that part, we need more transparency or explainable. It should be more explainable. So data-driven approach cannot be good for that approach at all. So, so what I'm telling is that we can divide and make it modular, and let's approach it in different way with the conventional technology and the AI technologies combined together. And the one bias which we use the OODA cycle, I think comment one thing. With the cycle terminology, there is tendency that we consider it as a kind of a serial process. I mean, the sensing and the situation awareness and decision making and control. So we think that time-wise, they should be happen sequentially. But though in real field, they occur, they are kind of a simultaneous process. So it's better to make a clear distinction between the module, and they can feedback forward or feedback backward each other's by the live data. So that's what we are doing in the development field.
Thank you very much. So I really wanted to continue conversation with Dr. Khan because even though we're just talking today, but from technical perspective, you could provide another traditional alternative when it comes to the operational concept in the military. So I think it could be really useful for us to better understand the some technical perspective and how could you work with the users in this case of the military. So I just want to ask the how does and for example, overall
Yeah. So, military part and the civil part. So what we admit is that we have a very different background in training or cultural work or the kind of even the life values. So what we should do first is that we should admit that we can have a very different background and values. So and even the words or sentences, we can use the same words, but we have a very different context of the meanings. So, for the examples, we call a boss. Many military person or the ordinary, not ordinary, people can imagine the bus that we use for our transportation. For the engineers like me, we think about the bus that transport the data and the power to the other systems. So yeah, so we have quite a different image in our brain. So, but in that one, we can coincide easily when we talk, working together. But but what I focus and what I tell is that recently there was one instance that happened in the robot community. So last year, ROS community announced an open letter that they reject to use the lost software for military weapon development. So what that was because what they said is that they didn't develop those the software package for systems, military weapon systems. So that's not their intentions. So more and more recently, the military weapons depends on the open source software. So let's say that it's a kind of a ROS or the DDS or PXPO or ArtPyro, such as open source. So that software packages are developed by many civilian volunteers. So they have a different values of some kind of social issues to the military persons. They don't have any, they have a different, they don't share same values on life. So, the military development. That's because the United States military want to adapt the user loss software package as a standard software tool to develop the robots and the unmanned ground vehicles. That's why they announced the open letter. But more and more the package. Without that package, actually, it's really possible to develop any robotic technologies in this time. It's quite time consuming and a lot of money and a lot of people required. So the together for the AI. So one question I wanted to say is that, so really the AI technology will make future world more cruel or destructive? I think that is not true, and that grounded on concrete evidences. Let's say the recent military conflict, we see many loitering munition or kamikaze drones are used in the battlefield. In that battlefield, we have two different kind of drones. One is the Shahed 136. It is only navigated by the waypoint and GNSS navigation system. So they define the way they so the they use so they can distinguish between the civilian target and the military target. So Shahed 136, it is not good for targeting or the bombing the military target because they cannot target the moving ones. So it is very not good weapon to targeting the battlefield objective because they move continuously. So they use that Iranian drone mainly for the civilian building or civilian infrastructures. But they are quite essential for the civilian daily life. But with the vision navigation, they use a more higher AI function drones. They use that drone mainly for the military targets. So that things give us some kind of idea that AI technology can distinguish between the civilian target and military target. So with the help of the legal people or the some kind of UN or some kind of civilians entity, we can make a framework that AI technology that can distinguish and civilian target and military target. We can make a kind of what the previous session they called stakeholders together, make a more humanity, yeah, they can work for the humanity AI technology together. So I think if we want to work together and more efficiently, we need to be the values between the civilian engineer and scientist and the military society should have a common value. We should based on the common value and the common visions. That is the advancement in humanity. So yeah, in this panel, I think it is quite a good for me to speak about. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it reminds me that just before I came to the UNIDIR, we have worked together to come up with the dual use drones standardization. So Dr. Khan came from the developer perspective, and I came from the military perspective. It took a lot of time to coordinate, come up with the really one idea how to develop these kinds of systems, and then I think it could be really. And I just like to go to Georgia. This rapid development on AI in the military domain. I just would like to go back to the perspective you might have because internet centers around the world. But that development, technical development, definitely have an impact in your legal perspective. I really wonder. Over to you.
Thanks. That is, yeah, definitely the question about how we move on the law. So I think, you know, if we're looking at that application that I spoke about first, about AI and decision support systems, because there's so many different applications of AI in the military that I think the responses are going to be different. Decision support for great caution. I think that the key for us is that militaries, decision makers, they need to be using these tools to really support and facilitate human decision making rather than aiming to replace it. I think, we really push back on the idea that AI does make decisions. That is a false equivalence. I think, decisions are a human act. They require human judgment. And as I said, ITL requires that exercise of human judgment. So, maintaining that space for human judgment, I think, is really key. Now, that has design and technical implications when you're talking about AI decision support systems. So I think they really need to be designed and used in such a way that the human can engage with them, can engage with the inherent uncertainties in that system, can engage with the assumptions that the functioning is based on, and the potential biases that are going to either appear in the data or in the output as well. And in addition, I think we're very strong that users have to be able to challenge the output as well. So this requires not only the time, so the time for deliberation to actually challenge the output, but also a greater situational awareness to maintain that and not have a blind reliance on one particular DSS output. And I think that fits with existing principles around intelligence gathering and cross-checking. So I don't think this is a new concept in that regard. Specifically on autonomous weapon systems and the integration of AI there, the ICRC has made some very specific recommendations to states, and this is on a legal side, so for new international legally binding rules. And I think, it's come out in this panel as well that there's a need for this commonality. There's a need for a kind of agreed set of limitations rather than each state acting on their own at the national level. So from the ICRC side, we've recommended prohibiting unpredictable autonomous weapon systems, and by that we mean systems where the effects can't be sufficiently understood, predicted, explained. And this comes back to, this idea of the black box effect that I spoke about before that is particularly apparent when you incorporate AI. We think that it would probably cover all machine learning enabled systems where they change functioning after deployment. So continuous machine learning, I think, would be very problematic from a predictability perspective. We've also recommended prohibiting the anti-personnel use, so targeting humans with autonomous weapon systems. And I think this comes back to what Dr. Kang was saying around, there are still very real questions about whether AI would ever be able to recognize protected categories of persons. So not only civilians who are not directly participating in hostilities, but also combatants who are wounded or sick at that time. And these are very complex determinations even for humans to make. So expecting that an artificial intelligence algorithm could do that, I think, is currently a little bit unrealistic. And even aside from that, there are very real ethical concerns around the targeting of persons with machines. And then even putting aside those prohibited categories, and I think coming back to this uncontrolled, cluttered, complex environment, particularly of ground warfare, but I would say of warfare in general, there will still be lingering abilities about the operational environment that need to be controlled. And that's where we've recommended very strict constraints on use. So around the types of targets, and you drew this out, I think, quite well about how different weapon systems are limited in different types of targets. So for us, we would limit autonomous weapon systems to objects that are typically military objectives by nature. We would limit the geographical scope, the duration, the scale of use, and this will vary depending on the operation. But if you're in an urban setting, these need to be incredibly tight due to that volatility of the environment. Situations of use, so perhaps rural urban environments, using them only in situations where there aren't civilians present, and maybe this leads us into the naval warfare discussion later on. I spoke earlier about human-machine interaction in the other application, but I think it is relevant for autonomous weapon systems. So allowing the ability for a human to effectively supervise and intervene. So it's not, necessarily control over the weapon system itself at all times, but essentially an overall force that is required by IHL and needs to be maintained with these different limitations. So that is, we're urging states to start negotiations. We have been for quite some time, and we see this as a real need for an international law response on this.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Passionate to study the first question was impacting the military domain. Is it forcing faster innovation? So anyone can jump in.
I'm happy to take a stab at that, I guess. I think one area that numerous governments have been interested in is automating logistical systems. So a common example citing self-driving cars has been transportation of munitions from bases to forward operating areas, and possibly collection of stick from forward operating areas back. So I think there is a very real connection between self-driving cars or self-driving vehicles and some of the kind of logistical functions of military systems. That's been the most interested, and I think the most like one-to-one application that I can think of in my mind.
Yeah, so the military side, the most important thing is the software tools, and tools came from and will come from this civilian side. So make the unmanned vehicle, autonomous vehicle work properly, we need a very well-designed, well-developed software tool to operate it. So that is mainly from the civilian side. So that is the key point, I think.
Thank you very much. The other question is about also the rule of law. So Georgia might jump in. How can AI be used proactively by non-state human rights actors to improve accountability or the rule of law in conflict? Big
So,
question.
I mean, you've brought up the issue of accountability, and the question is directed at how AI can improve accountability. But I must say that as soon as I start talking about accountability, what I see are challenges, because you have different mechanisms for holding not only individuals but states accountable in warfare for either breaches or violations of international humanitarian law, also violations of human rights where that's applicable. And I think that AI integration brings some very real questions around how you trace back an act. I mean, I said before that AI does not make decisions, and I think that's very true. But at what point do you lose, especially when we talk about individual criminal responsibility, at what point do you lose the required intention or the mens rea that is a feature of international criminal law systems, I would say, as well. So, it's an open question about the extent to which recklessness can meet criminal thresholds. So if you blindly rely upon an AI-enabled decision support output, to carry out an act that results in an IHL violation, do you have the intention? Well, I'm not sure that would always be answered in the affirmative, and I think if it's not, then we end up with potentially a situation where we cannot traceback accountability. In terms of accountability, I suppose the question is going to is around increased monitoring, increased information. And I know that this is particularly in many conflicts now we have, and not even in conflict, in other situations of violence as well, we have more information synthesized and analyzed than we perhaps ever have before. To see some of the fruits of those inquiries. But I would say, yeah, that there is probably potential. And again, it is about managing the risk, particularly the risks that arise when you're talking about information manipulation. And I think you raised this earlier in the applications of AI to information operations, to misinformation, disinformation. Now, sword, isn't it? The more information you have and that is analyzed and produced by AI, the greater the potential for things like deep fakes and the greater the potential for misinformation or deliberate disinformation. So I think that, you know, how to educate people to query, to question information that is promulgated, whilst also leveraging it for, you know, I would say the better of accountability in conflict. That's going to be the dilemma. I don't know if anyone else wants to add.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Georgia. So the less concerned by the private companies on security who got the authorization and a role in land warfare. What do you think about that? I think it's question about the in comparison with the naval and air domains, the impact of private sector could be larger when it comes to the operations on the could you maybe elaborate on that? It's more, let's say, maybe previous intervention be but could you more elaborate maybe when it comes to
Yeah, it's quite a tricky answer, but some tools and the parts and even the data and the way the language. So in military, they use the old ones, ADA, subtle languages such as an old ones. But in these days, we don't have any new developer who can deal with the military languages, coding languages at all. So there is I think this is the main drive. So we needed, the military should adapt to that private sector more eagerly, I think.
so what implications do these have for future battle or warfare? Could they
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered a little bit of this question already in terms of the direct challenges of urban warfare and how the inherent unpredictability that is in, you know, AI systems, whether they be at the more decision-making level, but I think this question goes directly to more autonomous vehicles and perhaps also they're implying sort of autonomous weapons in that. The key characteristic of urban environments is the interconnectedness of the systems there. So, that leads to specific concerns around the reverberating effects of an attack. Now, what you're attacking might at that time be a military objective by virtue of its use, but the destruction of whatever that is could have flow-on effects. And I think we particularly see this when we start to talk about the infrastructure of the civilian reliance on that. I mean, even a hospital can be a military objective with many qualifications and the requirement for warnings and things like this, but its destruction is not just about how many civilians are present in that hospital at that time, but it is about the flow-on effects of destruction of a service on which civilians rely upon, especially during times of armed conflict. And this holds true, for destroying areas of power grids that might be supplying both military and civilian facilities. And I mean, dams, obviously a very topical example, but these kinds of, these kinds of facilities that that civilians rely upon, I think are especially prevalent in urban environments. I would say that, when it comes to things like dams, there are specific protections for objects that may release dangerous forces in that way. And so IHL does try to address these challenges in an urban environment, but I think even beyond the baseline requirements of IHL, there are policies implementing to safeguard those reverberating effects in these environments, and introducing another level of unpredictability with autonomy doesn't seem to fit with that obligation necessarily. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in.
Uh, AI. But for example, the satellite images provided evidence for war crime in Bucha, Ukraine. So I mentioned that AI is used not only to control unmanned weapons, but also to process large amounts of data taken by satellites and so on. So AI prevent war crime. So I think that there is two sides of coin.
Thank you very much. I know it's so today's this panel particularly we focuses on artificial intelligence and land warfare. It's a very technical level to discuss, and then sometimes it's really challenging for the all stakeholders to really deep dive into the technical level of discussion on the battlefield. So it's quite, I just pose tough questions to all your speakers, but thank you very much for your answer. Maybe this one, the last question. So is a particular type for example, non-state actor, private military company, state, etc. So it's more about domain. Do you have any thoughts on this? Um, if the land characteristics we'd like to discuss actually in this panel more when it comes to the AI applications, but the reason why we just framed this panel to talk about artificial intelligence and land warfare on the is if you do not characteristics on the land itself, it might be really difficult to come up with the exact, accurate AI enabled systems to use in the military. So maybe these some of the questions about more the land domain itself. So could you elaborate on that or?
Maybe just to come back on sort of Michael's comments earlier, and I think, you know, around like where are we at in terms of incorporating specifically autonomy into capabilities for the land domain. I do think it's sort of at a more nascent stage than when you might talk about naval and air domains later. And I was at a kind of military industry conference in London earlier this year, and it was focused on land warfare. And what struck me was that most of the time, you know, these capabilities, even at the logistics chain level, were still running into trees and falling into potholes. And most of the time they sort of said, you know, it's probably better that we just remotely pilot them for the time being, because it's so much harder to plan for all the eventualities. And at the risk of becoming a broken record, I think this is probably the key point to be drawn out of this panel, is around the cluttered, the complex, the uncontrolled environment of ground warfare, and the extent to which, you know, autonomy is actually assisting at this point. I think we would say, you know, some of the benefits that are cited around greater precision and things like this are soldiers from the battlefield. I would say that these actually are achieved to the same degree, if not more, with remote piloted systems. So, you know, being able to have eyes on the target with a remote capability, I can certainly see the advantages there. But I think removing the human entirely, so that they do not choose the specific target, they do not choose the particular time, the location of the strike, to me, this actually lessens precision. So I think you start to lose some of the benefits there, and it increases risks, not only for, you know, civilians and combatants who are hors de combat, but also it increases the risks of a failure in the capability. So I would say that's probably particularly acute in the land domain.
Yeah, completely agree with everything you just said. Fantastic point. I don't know why I took the mic, because I'm just going to kind of repeat more like what you said. I do want to speak a little bit about the stakeholders question, which is you're going to see, because AI is really expensive and really, really hard to implement, as you've noted, it very limits the amount of actors who can use it effectively and who want to use it effectively. So looking at militaries that are very well funded, that feel in one area either a little behind, and so they want to kind of use autonomy or AI to catch up to rivals, or that is kind of like over. With the logistics, this person is driving this truck when they could be doing X, Y, Z much more valuable. So what is it, and where does removing the person not actually cause any serious issues? And so, and with the amount of cost and the amount of know-how it's a pretty small group of people who can hit that very small intersection.
So,
Yes. Yeah. So but the like lead and follow logistics applications. That I think the national that kind of application first. Yeah, so we can divide it a little bit and divide it and think it in different way.
thank you very much. I think we are heading to the end of this discussion. I hope these are the perspective areas, but still this topic would be really challenging when it comes to even though it's but specificities of this specific domain, we foreseeable future. So I hope you can join us throughout today's
Past the hour. Thank you. Okay, we need to do tests. Let's turn on all the microphones, all the handout microphones, turn them on. We're going to try them one by one. Can someone be connected to the streaming? 1, 2, 3. Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. 1, 2, 3. Okay, this one works. Let's try this other one. 1, 2, 3. This one works. Test, test, test. Okay. This one works. This one doesn't. Test, test. So the problem. So this one works well. This one works. Test, test. Well, it's all of it in the room. Oh, you are there, sorry. So this one works well. 1, 2, 3. Test, test. Can you go on settings, and see if we can increase the volume? Test, 1, 2, 3. Test. This works well. Okay. Can you call please Johanna and Sarah? Yeah, so they have to know. You have to speak on this mic. As moderator, you have to speak on this one. We'll tell Sarah as well. Now the problem is the people there. We try, we have 4 microphones.
Test. Okay, so not this one, no, ever. Yeah, that's for Giacomo now. I have to write it somewhere. Oh,
And when you speak, the speaker sometimes speak like that. No. You have to speak like that. So close. To avoid the noise cancelling and 1, 2, 3, test. How is the sound on the stream? 1, 2, 3. Good, you want to go outside? So we have to tell speakers to basically stack this in their mouth.
I can, yeah. Mine are only there.
Microphone number 1, test. Can you hear microphone number 1, test? Okay. Yes. Perfect. They used to work.
Now we have one.
Now we have one.
The first casualty of the conflict.
All right, so.
Okay, who's the next one? Giacomo.
Hey,
This one was
hey,
working. This one doesn't work. Yeah, but on the string, this one works much better than this one.
it's the same canal.
I know, it's very strange.
It's the same canal.
But it's okay if we ask the moderator to speak like into this mic, then she will.
Okay, so it's okay.
So we can just keep this one down and then we ask them to speak to this mic.
Okay, if you want, I put the volume higher on this mic.
If they speak to this one, it's fine. Let's keep it
Okay,
like it is.
okay.
Because this
So
one we know it works.
and I speak on the both. Okay, we ring at the both. Test. 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 Un, deux, 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 un, deux. Un, deux, un, deux, un, deux, un, deux, un, deux. Monitoring. Un, deux, un, deux, un, deux, un, deux, un, deux, un, deux.
Okay, try again.
Okay. I put higher the both. The both. Okay. And the sound is better on YouTube between StreamYard. Yeah, it's just delayed. The quality is better on YouTube.
I'll just quickly get a
All right, welcome back. I hope you can hear me okay online as well. I'm going to do my best to speak as loudly as I can into the microphone and invite the speakers here on the podium, on the stage with me to do the same. Welcome again. As I already introduced myself, I'm Giacomo. I'm the head of UNIDIR Security and Technology Program, and I'm truly delighted to have the opportunity to moderate this panel on AI and naval warfare. Full disclosure, part of the excitement is due to my past life, where I spent 15 years in the Italian Navy. So as I was preparing for this panel, so many great memories came back, and I'm really glad that I have the opportunity to discuss about this very interesting topic with our guests today. So I will introduce the panelists that will be helping us in going through this, this very interesting panel, which is going to be very different. The conversations you're going to hear are likely going to be very different from the ones you heard in the context of land warfare for obvious reasons. Nevertheless, I think it is really worth trying to reflect and perhaps build on some of the things that were said by colleagues before us to highlight even more where these differences are. So I hope that all the online speakers are connected. I'll start by introducing the colleagues that are here on the stage with me. On my left, we have Lieutenant Shannon Cooper, who is a legal officer at the Australian Department of Defense. And sitting next to her, we have Mr. Guy Carmelli, who is the R&D leader for the image processing department at the Israeli Aerospace Industries. Joining us online, we have Rear Admiral Pedro Heine, who is the commander of Maritime Operations and Protections of the Blue Amazon Command of the Brazilian Navy. We have Ms. Jennifer Parker, Deputy Director for Defense at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Abhijit Singh, who is the head of the Maritime Policy Initiative at the Observer Research Foundation and in India and former Indian naval officer. So very diverse set of perspectives, very, very interesting. And just to say a few words at the beginning of this panel, as I was trying to prepare for it, two kind of anecdotes from my time in the Naval Academy really came back strongly. First, I remember a professor from our weapons systems engineering class that told us an anecdote that if you had asked the average sailor that had to be on the lookout during World War II, late 30s, so the first part of the war, what would they need to make their job better? Most of them would have said, we need a bigger binocular. And then the radar came, right? So that is an important lesson for two reasons. First and foremost, they should be so deep. So users are doing what they do. And here we go with the mic. So, can you hear me now? Online? Okay, so let's just forget the microphones on the podium for a minute. I'm going to do a 30 seconds summary of what I just mentioned. So, as we think about the impact that technology can have in various domains of warfare, it is and telling an anecdote how I hope they needed, they would have said, we need a bigger binocular. And that clearly address the would have. So, no, complete silence, up and down. Up and down. We have the microphone. It seems. Okay. Anybody? Okay. We're just going to keep going and hopefully. And the second, these two key concepts that it doesn't matter. Everything which is sea control and sea domain. So everything that you do at sea is ensuring control to your when peacetime, security, shipping, whether it is in wartime to make sure ships can sail and have control. If you don't have control, then the other part of the strategy is sea denial. So sea denial, all of those things that navies do to make sure the cannot have control either. So ultimately, chief capability, the kind of concept, but these other control to the adversary. So I'm going to try. So really, have to our speakers in the what is faced by navies. So I'm going to start to make sure that our online speakers thumbs up if they did. There's a few more minutes to confirm that you could hear. We'll start with colleagues here in the room. Perhaps Shannon. Go.
Thanks, Giacomo. Not to caveat this first with being a military member and a legal officer, that these are my personal views and don't represent the Australian Defence Force or the Australian government. But thank you for the question. Some of the opportunities, if I start there, is that AI, particularly we've learned about decision supports to systems, can help us with situational awareness, weapons development, threat management and logistics. There's huge opportunities for the Navy to engage with AI and use that to assist us. And one of the challenges, because I'll keep it short, is that with the adoption of AI comes the risks, technical and legal, and how you articulate that into system design and testing, which is quite a challenge, but not something that can't be overcome.
Yes, so first of all, to join my colleagues about the AI limitations. So we actually having problem with, computations. So we actually stop some researchers according to this. So this is okay. So So put to fully submarines, battleships. So vision system. We have a section of creativity. We can create. We also have some. So actually things. So things that coding this, this technology is stable. So the computer vision is stable because to event that surround as we see. So and I think this so smart bombs guided image. So this is this is the reason also that we have a lot of because this is just and this is support the battleship. There is no infinity of resources. So it's very to do. And of course, goal is additional subject. It's like snow. And generate AI. So we can think of create a simple picture that will simplify the way we see the underwater because it's very of the something. In addition, we talked about the news. Things according to some experience. Helicopters and autonomous drones to land on the ship deck because ship motion. So, from random landing to a guided landing. And we also speak with, we have pilots. It's some guy that gives signals to the pilot. The pilots actually don't look at it. At some point they just land and that's it. With 2 seconds after they decide, they just land on the ship deck. But this process is wrong. We want to move from random landing to guided landing, because we want to be on the safe side as much as we can. And the final area, it's called that can lead us to independent intelligence entity. It can be vessels, it can be submarine, because sometimes at naval situation you don't have second chance. It's like a space. You must be reliable. You must do redundancy. And sometimes you don't have second chance. So with process and agent, if we do something that we want to do, it will do. And by this way, we actually design it's called it's a very, very complex issue, because if succeed to very complex, so find specifically on each operation. At the end of the process, with the combination of penalty and penalty, I'm not sure that the agent will behave. So I must agree with my colleague that, that said that I think that because of the vision that we will design a reward function like this, so sometimes cannot expect.
Thank you.
See, or have you seen operational requirements for navies having evolved? What are some of the challenges? What problems could AI help to fix? Admiral Hein, can you? Would you like to? All right, let's see. No? Can you?
Admiral Hein. Good morning to all present. I'm sorry I can't hear your question for all, but I think it's the same we were talking before. I compliment Mr. Giacomo and the other colleagues in this panel, and I will talk about how can AI help the navies and the challenges we are facing today. AI has revolutionized naval warfare by providing enhanced capabilities in some key areas. Some of them situational awareness, decision support, and autonomous vehicles. AI processes sensor data from various sources, including satellites, sensors on chips, and unmanned systems to provide real-time and comprehensive situation awareness. It enables the identification of threats, monitoring of maritime activities, and prediction of enemy movements, enhancing the effectiveness of naval operations. And we can talk about this in maritime security applications. The intelligent decision support, AI analyzes complex maritime scenarios, considering factors such as weather conditions, vessel movements, and mission objectives. It generates recommendations and supports human commanders in making informed decisions, optimizing mission planning, tactical maneuvering, and resource allocation. In autonomous vehicles, AI enables the deployment of unmanned surface vessels and unmanned underwater vehicles that can operate autonomously. These autonomous vehicles perform surveillance, reconnaissance, mine clearance, and intelligence gathering tasks, navigating complex maritime environments, and extending operation capabilities. In enhanced situation awareness that we talked about maritime security, AI plays a crucial role in processing and analyzing vast amounts of sensor data, resulting in improved situation awareness for naval forces. AI systems offer valuable assistance to human commanders by analyzing complex maritime scenarios and generating recommendations as the intelligent decision support different kinds of systems on board the ships. And about autonomous vehicles, AI facilitates the deployment and operation of unmanned surface vessels or drones, underwater drones, providing capabilities in armed conflicts at sea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Admiral. Can you hear me now? Can anyone online hear me? Yes?
I can hear you, Giacomo, intermittently.
What a relief. Okay, Jennifer, why don't you go next?
So look, thank you and hello, good evening to everybody there in Geneva online. Wonderful to see my previous colleague Shannon Cooper there in Geneva, and I'm disappointed I can't be there with you. Look, from what I've heard, my comments are fairly similar. I think when we talk about trends in naval warfare, we talk about concepts like the speed of relevance, hypersonic capabilities, challenges in the ability to detect, track, and intercept. We talk about challenges with dealing with data, which is relevant to all spheres of warfare. Particularly constrained, though, in naval warfare when you're dealing with big data, particularly especially when you're dealing with targeting and things like that. Generally, ships have limited communication abilities, which is again one of the challenges with dealing with AI. We're also talking about trends in sizes of fleets. As warships have become more and more complex, industrial bases really struggle to keep up with building these warships. And we've seen that in a number of countries. So you're seeing trends where countries are looking to uncrewed capabilities and uncrewed autonomous capabilities to try and deal with that, to increase their fleet size. You're seeing a real focus on logistics support to vessels at sea and the opportunities that AI offers in that. And I think Lieutenant Cooper flagged that previously. Again, constraints in crewing of vessels. As vessels have become more complex, crew sizes have grown. And that is a challenge for many navies, and one that navies are looking for AI to try and solve. So I think there are a lot of key trends that can be addressed by the integration of AI. I think it's important when we talk about AI and naval warfare, though, to not think about this as a future thing. AI, or simple AI, has actually been in use on modern warships for quite a while. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if some of my colleagues have flagged this. I couldn't quite hear, but certainly most combat management systems today have some degree of simple AI. Most navigation systems and most engineering systems have some degree of simple AI. So it's important to understand that AI is not a new concept for naval warfare, but it is an evolutionary concept when you start to think about concepts of strong AI or deep learning or machine learning, which is kind of the next evolution, and is viewed as a mitigant for some of those key trends that I've talked about in naval warfare.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. I would like now to give the floor to Abhijit, if you can hear me. You have the floor.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pauli. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. At the outset, thank you very much for inviting me to the excellent panel. I would have liked there to be in person, but unfortunately, I've not been able to make it. I'm very happy to be here virtually and speak to all of you. I think the point has been very well made that AI is an asset for maritime forces. It is seen to have an invaluable benefit if incorporated in naval systems. The point that I'd like to highlight, however, is that the reason why AI is seen to be this game-changing technology is, of course, one on account of these significant benefits that it gives navies when they are in war-fighting conditions. And a lot of things have been brought out. It improves situational awareness. It makes decision-making more easy, more smooth. And it allows you to use autonomous vehicles in ways that have not been used so far. So it makes autonomous operations more efficient. But beyond that, I think the fact is that it makes day-to-day manned operations more efficient. And this is a emerging discourse within many maritime forces around the world, that you don't want to go into areas that are contentious. For example, AI in lethal autonomous weapon systems is a contentious area. You're not sure about whether a machine should be in a position to take that decision to engage a target in lethal ways. But the one thing that there is enough consensus on is that AI should help us in day-to-day tasks such as logistics, such as supply chain management, such as training, such as preventive maintenance. So in a lot of the navies, including the Indian Navy that I was a part of a couple of years ago, the emphasis on AI is to bring it onto the margins and then see how things pan out and try and also then bring it into combat systems. As regard combat systems, I'd like to point out that the future maritime scenario that we are looking at is likely to be very complex. The issue is that we're going to be facing a multiplicity of threats and challenges, not issues that we've not faced up until now. Many of the threats that we will face tomorrow are the threats that we still face today. But the difference is that the scale and tempo at which these threats are going to come at us is going to be much more, much bigger and more complex and more complicated than it is at the moment. So the appreciation is that hostile forces will use sophisticated technologies, and they will create in the littorals what navies call as A2AD bubbles, anti-access, anti-denial bubbles, or strike reconnaissance complexes. And it's going to be very hard to burst these bubbles, to penetrate these bastions of control. So the only way a Navy can be effective if it stays outside, but it makes these bursts in combat situations, into that bubble, carries out its operations and comes out. So the speed and scale and tempo at which these navies will need to react or respond in war-fighting situations will need to be very different from what we are engaged in at the moment. In other words, AI will offer us, or at least the promise is that tomorrow AI will offer us a competitive advantage over adversaries. And that is the promise that all the navies are working towards. However, in balance, I would say that every navy is on a different point on the evolutionary curve. Some are much further. They have the conversation is more robust. The activities towards developing AI are more developed. But in some other navies, it's taking a while because a lot of technologies are being sourced from abroad. A lot of the source codes, the links, etc., for tactical systems are not indigenously developed. And that means that there is a great dependence on technology from abroad, and the AI story hasn't developed very fast. So that's how it is. But AI surely is going to be a technology for navies and maritime forces going forward. That's where I'd like to stop.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your insights. I still hope you can all hear me online. I think it's useful to reflect on the point you just mentioned about how modern warfare is moving towards a competition in time and space, which has always probably been the case, but now space is getting bigger and time is getting shorter. So modern warfare becomes the pursuit of that window of opportunity that would allow forces, military forces, to engage and accomplish their mission. And it is, reflecting at the beginning, we heard about how difficult it is to interpret the image produced by a sonar. Well, it's interesting because hunting a submarine, can take days, hours, days. You can do 15, 16, 17 hours trying to find the submarine. And then once you find it, or if you don't, once the submarine finds you and releases a torpedo in the water, then you have seconds to react. So you can have a crew that has been on a submarine hunt for 2 days, and then torpedoes in the water, and you have seconds to react, otherwise it's done. So thinking about how technology can help in supporting humans in doing their job better is definitely important. On this end, I have my second kind of cluster of questions, which is really more focusing on the specific technical considerations that have to go into, when we're thinking about integrating AI in the naval domain and on warships. Now, artificial intelligence systems, people think of them as the model, but the model itself won't take you far. The model has to be run by a system, a computing system. So there is an infrastructural footprint in terms of computing power, size of the servers and the computers that are needed, energy consumption, cooling requirements. This infrastructural and kind of physical footprint is clearly about the naval domain, because warships are not land bases where you can have underground floors full of servers and stacks of chips. There are limitations in space. There are limitations potentially on energy. Maybe not this time, but in wartime, captains may have to be called to make a decision over which systems to prioritize. If, for example, the ship is hit and full of energy available. Cooling might be a problem, etc. The physics of the ocean, whether you are on it or are different from the physics on land. So what kind of when we're posing with the technology that we have today in the naval domain. And I'd like to start potentially with Guy here, in the hope that you have.
Thank you. So one word. So if we remember that we understand today we just jump in this step. We don't. We give. So so this is about the things that we need to. No, sometimes chaos. It's very difficult to analyze decision in addition. The cameras. See, this area there is a process of called migrants. Give you abilities to do all side. You can get results and inject again this camera, for example, this processor, and get. Okay. So we so every what we do for us, we must take it with. Additional thing is expose. So infinity missiles. So very happy. Yes. We see the smart things and on the and of course what a lot of application also implemented on mobile. So we can take algorithms and complex algorithms and make some changes because at the end of the day, image processing also done on our mobiles. So we need to adapt some technology, maybe to do some changes. The algorithm to achieve efficient algorithm, but
I'd just like to add one point. One of the challenges is that, from a technical perspective, the use of AI, particularly in the military domain and naval warfare, is that it must be explainable. We touched on this morning from previous panelists about responsible and accountable use of AI. But a technical challenge will also be the explainability of that use.
Thank you. I'd like now to okay. Try again. I mean,
Hey, Giacomo, I can't hear you very well online, but happy to offer some comments on some of the technical challenges. If you want to give me a thumbs up, if that's useful. Perfect. Look, I did hear some of the comments, certainly from Lieutenant Cooper, talking about trust and the ability to explain. I think, although not specifically a technical challenge, one of the biggest issues with the integration of AI in naval warfare is actually encouraging commanders to trust that and to want to rely on those systems. And that goes to them understanding how those systems work and that explainability Lieutenant Cooper was talking about. There's also some challenges. I think in your intro, you talked about the limitations that ships experience from energy to communications. And so I think that those things will be limiting factors for the integration of some of these capabilities. I think also it's important to talk about how you intend to use AI. We use it as a very general term. We're actually talking about a whole spectrum of capabilities, whether that is assisting in engineering diagnosis, assisting in navigation, or autonomously operating an uncrewed vessel. And it's important to understand which element of that you are talking about when you're talking about some of the technical considerations. You know, for example, with an uncrewed capability that is autonomously operated, that a lot of people talk about when they're thinking about AI in naval warfare as a force multiplier. There are a lot of technical challenges actually operating those capabilities. And I think it's important when you're working out how you intend to operate it and where you intend to operate it, what your concept of operations is for this capability in naval warfare. For example, an uncrewed surface vessel that's autonomous, you know, there's lots of views of lethal autonomous weapon systems with autonomous ships up threat with missiles on board. But there's actually a number of technical constraints in using that, whether that be how do you actually maintain an AI-led autonomous vessel up threat, to how do you provide the logistics support. And again, when you're talking about underwater capabilities, and I think I heard you mention in your intro that the impact of different environments on some of these capabilities, you know, it may be all well and good to design a uncrewed underwater vessel with autonomy and can go off and can do these things without needing to have a person in the loop or in fact on the loop. But how do you actually usefully use that in naval warfare? And so what are some of those technical constraints? For example, you know, an autonomous underwater vessel that is using ISR, right? It's a key ISR capability. Well, how does it actually get that information back to someone to action that? Or how do you actually engage with that vessel to get them to take action on a target? And some people may say, well, the point is it's autonomous. It doesn't need to. But I don't think we're anywhere near that concept of unrestricted warfare where most commanders would actually allow that to occur. So that goes back to the technical considerations. It also goes back to the trust. There's also, and I think we'll talk about this in the next element session, a number of legal considerations around that.
thank you. Admiral, if you can hear me, can you go next? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you very much. I think your question is about the challenge and considerations in naval warfare. Some points I can put to debate. The data quality and the reliability. AI algorithms rely on high quality and reliable data for accurate decision making. Then, ensuring the availability, integrity, and security of data sources are crucial to avoid biased or erroneous outcomes. Another point is the human-machine collaboration. Maintaining effective human-machine collaboration is critical in an armed conflict. Human operators must maintain control over AI systems, ensuring that critical decisions related to the use of force remain subject to human judgment. ethics, and accountability. Another point is cybersecurity. The integration of AI in an armed conflict at sea introduces new cybersecurity challenges. Safeguarding AI systems and networks from cyber threats is vital to prevent unauthorized access, manipulation, or disruption that could compromise mission success and endanger human lives. Addressing these challenges and considerations is crucial to maximize the benefits of AI while minimizing risks and ensuring compliance with legal and ethical frameworks.
Thank you. Abhijit, can you hear me? Please go next.
Thanks, thank you. So I'd like to make the point that there is this notion that AI can transform operations in a jiffy. And if we were just to switch over to AI, we would be so much more effective in the way we carry out operations, which is really not true. Because AI is not a thing. It's not like a software that you can upload on your systems and the system begins to perform miracles. What really happens is that maritime forces look at a problem, they look at a challenge, they look at a mission set, and they look at ways in which better data collection and a move towards digital transformation can help deal with that problem much better. And all of this takes time. And I think one of the panelists made the point that AI is incremental. It is not transformational in the way that that is often portrayed to be. This is a technology that's going to evolve with a period of time. And the main constraint really is not so much the machine, it's really the man behind the machine. And I completely agree with the Admiral when he talks about the man-machine partnership or the man-machine coupling. That is key. The machine will act in the way it is asked to act. But the problem is that the men behind it, the human behind it, is used to a certain culture. Armed forces are used to a certain culture of operation. And that operation and that culture does not feel very comfortable dealing with seamless operations and cross-cutting ways of dealing with data. We're somehow conditioned to act in silos. So one of the things when this digital transformation will occur, and I must make the point that AI has really a digital substrata that runs underneath it. If the men are not used to the idea of working in an integrated digital environment, AI cannot be the success story that we want it to be. So if that does not happen, if you don't get the men to change their ways and to unlearn and condition themselves again, it's going to be very hard to work with AI. But I also want to point out that there is a big debate within navies, and I've served in one, and I know for sure that at least in India, this is an ongoing debate about how effective AI is going to be. There are proponents and there are critics of this new technology. The proponents who are very tech savvy often point out that the digital transformation that's happening in AI is not going to remain limited to the civilian world outside. It's not going to be remain limited to commerce and health and other areas. It's going to be a part of the military, and we better change our ways. And because our adversaries are going to include AI in their systems and their own data collections, their own autonomy, their decision making is going to become much more superior going into the future. But the opponents say that there is a need to audit AI because AI has opportunity costs. You can make a huge deal of investment in AI, but there is no saying what returns it will get you. They also point to the fact that the AI may not be survivable in war. The fact is that the adversary is going to target our communication systems, our data collecting ability, our communications, and will AI then be helpful? So we must not let go of our native skills. So the better way to do things is to continue to do what you're doing, but only integrate AI, as I was talking about earlier, on the margins. Just see how it can help you to do the basic tactical stuff, and then wait before you begin to include it within bigger operations, within your combat management systems, etc. I'm not saying that the critics have better convincing power. I think that both sides make persuasive arguments, but I'm saying that AI is it's not as if all of the decision makers or the decision-making elite have an agreement over how much AI to incorporate and in what ways to incorporate. I'd like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. You raised very valuable points there, and I like to reflect also on kind of an underpinning argument that there is this sense of inevitability of AI that is coming, and there is nothing that we can do to stop it. There is nothing we can do to control it or to prevent it from having effects that we don't want. That's not actually true. We're still fully in control in terms of deciding to what extent a technology that may well be developed in labs, in companies, etc. But as in military forces, just because a technology is available on the market, they're not just going to blindly acquire it and deploy it without thinking through all of the steps and consequences that integrating that technology could bring. We're talking about a sector that is probably one of the most self-regulated sectors that exists, from how you dress to how you eat. So let alone how you will be integrating a technology this powerful into military capabilities. And there's also the point about skills that was mentioned. I think it is important that as we see potentially AI becoming or substituting human operators in the conduct of certain tasks, how do we make sure that we retain those skills so that when AI fails, human operators can be that layer of redundancy that is needed to ensure that the operation continues, but also be able to detect that the AI system is not operating as it should. So the skilling problem, I think it's a very important problem in all domains, but potentially in the naval one, more so, considering that when you're out at sea and potentially you are under very strict communication control or emission control regimes, you can't pick up the phone and call the developer and be like, hey, I need help. The resources you have on the ship are the resources that you have to fix the problem. So it is really important that skilling remains at the core of what we do. The last cluster of question that I have is really more focusing about the legal part, the legal element here. And well, international law is international law. IHL is IHL, and it doesn't matter where you are. However, there might be some specific challenges that we can think of when it comes to the application of IHL or of international law in the naval domain, particularly when artificial intelligence and autonomous systems are included. So I just wanted to ask all of our speakers to reflect from their perspectives, what are some of these unique legal considerations, if you want, if not necessarily challenges, that need to be taken into account when thinking about AI in the naval domain? And Shannon, as you can expect, I'm going to start with you on this.
Thanks, Giacomo. So one of the fundamental things that I think for legal risks is that the law holds states and individuals responsible rather than the AI technology itself, because a machine can't be held accountable. It's the human command and control that it will be held responsible and accountable for the actions, the effects that are generated from that particular capability. From a legal perspective, legal reviews of systems that contain AI, such as the decision support systems, so problem solving, that could be assisted with many military operations. Legal reviews hold an important part of that, because it's not just assessing that particular weapon or capability complies with international law, as you've just mentioned. It's the use of the weapon itself and how that use can comply with international humanitarian law. As I said, I think that, we've spoke about responsible, accountable and explainable, and the application or the review on the use of these particular capabilities, as I mentioned before, that's where we can get the most traction on being responsible, accountable and explainable use of AI in naval warfare. I think we spoke about the land domain and the differences between the naval warfare and the maritime domain, and it is platform-based. The law of naval warfare is very old. We have different considerations from a naval maritime domain insofar, as I said, it's particularly for targeting purposes or engagement or using ISR to identify, locate and track a particular capability. It's always platform-based. And any use of AI capabilities to do that will still need to comply with international law.
Okay, I'm not a legal advisor, but generally the engineers will give the solution. So I think someone needs to supervise this from the top, because it's a legal things. That's it, not much.
That's fine. I didn't want to put you on the spot on legal issues. I'm just going back online, and in the hope that this time, third time is the charm. I hope that you can hear me, and if so, Hein, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk about specifically lethal autonomous weapon systems, because I think when we talk about legal, this is important to talk. The laws can operate with varying degrees of autonomy, limited to fully autonomous decisions making. The application of the law requires context-specific judgments, taking into account the complexity of naval operations and the unique challenges of the maritime domain. Legal requirements must be continuously assessed and updated to address technological advancements and involving operational realities. Also, in the open sea, on the surface and waters below, the assessment of three most important principles of the law of targeting: distinction, proportionality, and precaution, may not be the same for engagements in urban scenarios, in view of the remote possibility of civilian presence in the former scenario. For instance, naval engagements at sea, including air combat, represent small risks to civilians. But the principle of human control assesses that humans must retain ultimate control and responsibility over decisions involving the use of force. It's important. Human judgment, ethics, and accountability are essential to ensure compliance with legal and ethical standards. Ensuring meaningful human control in the context of laws is crucial to establish mechanisms that ensure meaningful human control. These mechanisms may include pre-programmed rules of engagement, real-time human oversight, and the ability to intervene or deactivate autonomous systems when necessary. Another point is to ensure compliance with legal and ethical standards. Robust accountability mechanisms must be in place. These mechanisms should attribute responsibility for actions taken by laws and hold individuals or states accountable for violations of law. In the end, the responsibility for the effects of military operation, including those resulting from the use of this kind of weapons, will at last fall under the commanders at sea. And another point is the introduction of AI raises challenges in allocating legal responsibility for actions and consequences. Traditional legal frameworks attribute responsibility to human actors based on notion of intent, causation, and foreseeability. However, AI-driven decision-making questions arise regarding the allocation of legal liability.
Thank you. Abhijit, I'll come to you next.
Thank you. Look, notwithstanding the compelling narrative that surrounds artificial intelligence, it does pose some legal, ethical, and doctrinal dilemmas. Let me talk a little bit first about the ethical dilemma. The development of artificial intelligence is characterized by what some have called a predisposition to certain kinds of data. And what they're implying is that there's a bias in the way the data is collected, and that data is exposed to the machines. So it's almost as if we're telling the machine to act in a certain way given our own, hypothetically or thematically, given our own prejudices. And so we force the machine to act in ways that we want the machine to act. And so it's not really, in a matter of speaking, independent in the way it makes decisions. So the critics of AI also allege that these probabilistic outcomes that AI comes up with, and AI acts on actually probability. It doesn't have a human's brain. It's got a lot of data. It sees probability. It then it identifies one solution as the most probable, most likely solution. But the manner in which it reaches that conclusion, it infers that this is the most optimal solution. That critics say is flawed, and that can muddle even human decision making. And it is a detriment for the commander. It can undermine combat solutions. These are all allegations, but I'm just putting out the debate out there for you to consider and for you to think about. Second, AI automates weapons in ways that are inconsistent with the laws of war. This is a point that has been alluded to in the past, but let me just underline that. Because technology is clinical. Technology does not understand laws of war. It does not understand, humanity, necessity, proportionality, etc. It just does what it has been trained to do, and that can sometimes be a problem. But the bigger problem from a maritime, or rather from a naval perspective, navies being armed forces, is that there is a doctrinal dilemma, which is that how do you incorporate AI-fueled solutions into machines when the technology that is being used is in a nascent stage of development? None of the technologies that we are dealing now are been fully matured, and yet we expect AI to deliver. That can be a problem. Doctrine is actually premised on a traditional understanding of conflict, and war is a normative construct. And in this normative construct, there are rules, there are codes, there are regulations, that ethical standards that need to be followed. And AI, it's going to be very hard for AI to live up to these expectations. Lastly, the legal questions. The legal question is as follows. Let me just give you a hypothetical sort of a scenario. If you have an AI-enabled unmanned drone outside the territorial waters of any state, and that drone, depending on its own, and say it's peacetime, but it's semi-peacetime, and depending on its own appreciation of threats, it engages a warship which is within the territorial waters of another country. What are the legal ramifications going to be? Is that drone, that unmanned drone, legally correct in engaging a target within the territorial waters of another ship? And what if the ship, which is within the territorial waters, actually responded to the mothership and took down the mothership, which is again outside the territorial waters of the ship? So the point I'm trying to make is that when it comes to the legal dimension, when it comes to UNCLOS, there are many gray areas about the operations of unmanned vehicles. And a lot of these unmanned vehicles are going to be powered by AI in the future. So we've got to be very clear about how this artificial intelligence, how the rules around these artificial intelligence are going to be developed. And only then can we take a decision on whether we should enable AI to take the decisions that so far human beings have taken, command teams have taken. And that's, I think, the core of the anxiety that at least the strategic community in a number of countries and the decision makers face. And I'm going to stop here. Thanks.
Thank you. Jennifer, I'll come to you.
Thank you. And look, I guess when we're talking about legal considerations of AI and naval warfare, it's certainly a really fascinating space. I mean, the law of naval warfare itself, for those geeks anyway, is a fascinating space. And I think my colleagues touched upon it. When you're talking about the concept of the law of naval warfare, you need to remember that the law of naval warfare has not effectively been updated in over 100 years. You know, some people refer to the San Remo manual, but that is not international law. So, of course, when you're thinking about the law of naval warfare, the law of armed conflict, even UNCLOS, these things did not contemplate some of the technological advancements that we're experiencing today. And AI is one of those things that didn't contemplate. But it's also important to remember that that doesn't mean that international law, the law of armed conflict, the law of naval warfare, UNCLOS doesn't apply to these capabilities. It does. And there are some key considerations that need to be thought of when you're thinking about the application of these capabilities. And I think Lieutenant Cooper touched upon the need for weapons review. So, you know, under the additional protocols, there is a requirement for any weapon that is introduced to be reviewed. And that's still applicable to a weapon system where AI is integrated into that. There's concepts like, you know, the law of targeting, for example, under additional protocol 1. Again, you know, principles such as distinction, proportionality, and the obligation to take feasible precautions need to be factored into AI. And there are some views that certainly elements of that could be written into AI algorithms, and you know, and that may well be the case, and that's something that would need to be considered during the weapons review. It is difficult to see how the element required, though, for precautions in attack could be complied with a fully AI weapon system. You know, and specifically because, and I'm not going to have the exact words here, but, you know, under the requirement for precautions of attack, there is the requirement for a commander to be able to stop the engagement if the target is deemed not to be a proper military objective. So there are some challenges under current law of armed conflict about the use of AI, and some things that probably can't be overcome in the near future. I think when you look at specific capabilities, so one of my colleagues here has touched upon the use of uncrewed surface vessels in some sort of autonomous mode relying on AI. There's also real specific considerations around are they a belligerent? You know, under international law, only warships can be belligerents. But could an uncrewed surface vessel be a warship? You know, when you look at the definition of a warship, it needs to be commanded by a naval officer. Are they commanded by a military officer? Are they in fact vessels? There's a fascinating conversation that the IMO is going through right now, looking at UNCLOS, and could you call an uncrewed surface vessel a vessel by definition? Hard, because definitions vary. So I think there's a lot of fascinating elements that don't necessarily prohibit AI into the future, but certainly are considerations on the design and the implementation. So, you know, the person on the loop, the person in the loop, or fully autonomous. And I think that, you know, that there is certainly a view of a lot of commentators out there that, you know, international law needs to evolve to take into account these technologies. And whilst that is entirely true, I think we are unlikely to be into a geopolitical circumstance in the near term that would allow the relitigation of concepts such as UNCLOS or the law of naval warfare. I think those remarkable times in history where you had agreements between a large number of states are just not reflective of our current circumstance. So I think in understanding some of those challenges and moving ahead, I think it's important for states to put out their declaratory policy on how they view these capabilities under international law. It's important for discussions like this to try and establish an understanding of norms, of how they are and how they will be operated. And I think that is really key. One of the concerns with the integration of emerging technology into conflict, into naval warfare, is not understanding how an adversary will react to it, because there is no norms. It's not clear how they're viewed under international law. So putting out views and countries establishing how they view these capabilities, I think is really important to kind of influence how they'll be reacted to.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these observations. We still have a few minutes before our lunch break, and I do have a couple of follow-up questions, both for you colleagues in the room and for those joining us online. So first, back to you, Guy. When it comes to, you specialize in image recognition, image processing, etc. And in the naval domain, and also linking to what Jennifer was just mentioning about the principle of distinction and how important it is to be able to distinguish potential targets, etc. In the naval domain, image recognition, even human-led image recognition, still plays a key role today. Well, it's been a while since I left, but lookouts, people on the bridge are always given silhouettes of vessels of interest, potential adversary ships, potential adversary aircrafts, because ultimately there is no radar screen yet, at least that can match the human eye when it comes to the positive identification of a target, right? So from the command center, they will always ask for do we have the positive identification of the target? Now, this seems like an area, a potential area where technology is developing at a pace that will soon be allowed to significantly improve the capabilities of doing that. So my question to you is, how is the technology in that field evolving, potentially in an environment like the naval domain that isn't as cluttered as it could be the land, as we've heard before? And then potentially a follow-up for you, Shannon. From a legal perspective, is a positive identification of a target by a machine equally viable, or what would be kind of the quote-unquote legal consequences of considerations of a captain taking action based on a positive identification of a target made by an artificial intelligence system?
Yes, so just one word about your last question. So I think that when you have autonomous entity, it doesn't matter if it's vessels or submarines, at the end of the day, there is a soldier that probably just finished his course yesterday, so people will use it, the autonomous abilities. So we actually need to see how to supervise. It's very difficult. Now, as I see the picture for the future, today we're talking about that we always connected, everything is connected and all the time. So there is a lot of synchronous between the battleship, airplanes, land. So actually, and of course, with the image processing capabilities, we can analyze and detect a lot of objects on the sea and operate different tools like aircraft, weapons, land weapons. So I think in this field we have a good future, that we will be able to operate different tools, different weapons from different sides. Mm-hmm. So this is what I'm thinking.
In response to your question about positive identification and the use of AI capabilities, the international law does actually contemplate the use of capabilities, for example, UNCLOS as capability agnostic, but for hot pursuit, for example, the use of an uncrewed system to continue the visual identification is acceptable in international law. And likewise, the use of an intelligence product available for a commander at the time, they can use all relevant and available and reasonable information to positively identify a particular target that is a military objective. There's no prohibition in international law from the use of that particular capability to do so. I think we spoke about this morning from a previous panel, there's no blind reliance on the use of an AI capability. It will always have some kind of human command and control, whether that is originates from the decision of a commander to employ a particular capability, as opposed down to the operator level when there is application of the use of force. So the law itself is technology agnostic, and there's no prohibition or prevention from using an AI capability for positive identification, because it will not be the only consideration.
Thank you. Okay, I think we are unfortunately time to wrap up this very interesting panel. I could go on hours and hours talking about naval domain. I want to speakers online and extend my apologies for all of the technical difficulties. We'll keep working on these. Better afternoon. So thank you so much, Amir Hain, Mr. Singh, and Mr. Parker, and Shannon here and Guy on stage for sharing with us your insights. And thank you again, and we'll see you after the lunch break. Thanks.